It just a random idea just got into my head, and so I'm gonna be very brief in order how to resolve this problem of racial inequality. That's what you guys talking about. I guess the first one, being a Russian person, I would say that people in general are not exposed to struggle with other races. For example, Chinese and Russian, right? White guy, other either doing these pull-ups, you know, sweating, struggling, or me and Tarek in St. Petersburg, like 700 kilometers, the second capital of Russia. That's how we call it, the North capital. Struggling to find a place to smoke weed, or try to do to film something, to conduct an
This is an
interview.
actual story.
Yeah. That's the struggle, man.
That's right.
And that's how, when you struggle, you start to develop this compassion. And on the one hand, we have this fucking furious climate change, which could be real, like it is a big problem, but in 10-15 years, it's just gonna be, intolerable. And I have this belief when it's gonna happen and hit really bad, that's what's gonna unite people. Because this misery, either it's a war or like famine or a struggle, real struggle, that's what brings people united, regardless of any attributes. That's the first point. The second point, yeah, we just gotta promote interracial porn in school. That no, I'm just kidding. I'm just
School.
kidding. But like, I started to watch that shit, as I was like, I don't know, 16 or something, I just had this curiosity, like, but how do like other nations fuck, But yeah, it's off the top. But
that's great, man. It's very worldly of you.
The second point I would say, yeah, interracial marriages. And you've been a good example. And I have a question personal, because we've been debating this with Tarek. So Tarek's initial point was like, we could reduce the number of those inequalities by just getting married with all kinds of people, promote this diversity. So to what extent do you agree with this statement? I might be misinterpreted, but I guess
it's close enough. Close enough.
Like most problems, there isn't going to be the one thing. That seems like one of the essential tools on the tool belt to eliminating or significantly reducing biases. I guess the reason I say that is while being with someone that is culturally different from yourself can provide you insight into what that culture is, you as the observer, the person that is learning about this, can take that as you can make the effort to understand it as genuinely as possible and know like where your boundaries are, know your place, and be just an honest agent in that interaction. That's still not, I don't know how to encapsulate that part. It'll be easier to define the other side, which is almost exoticize it, right? Like, even though you are familiar with all the details, it is still a separate thing. And I feel like that has existed before. Another way of putting this is, like if I were dating someone that's Black, right? No matter how much of their day-to-day experiences they tell me, and how much I can start to, I always mix up sympathize or empathize. No matter how much I can attempt to kind of appreciate what it means to go through those details and feel for that person, right? Genuinely. won't know truly what it means to be in that spot. And likewise, they won't know what it truly means to be in my spot. And that divide will always be there. We have the foresight and perspective to appreciate that divide exists and know that our ability to cross that bridge is somewhat limited, but still make the best attempt to be, I suppose, I don't like to use terms that are commonplace, but an ally, right? Just be a support mechanism in some ways, be an appreciator, just be like a genuine actor, then you can move in the right direction. But if you, yeah, again, this is a place where, you know, I'm completely speculating and I don't know. I think that would be an essential part of the tool belt, and that would help make a lot of changes. But that in and of itself, without the proper perspective changes in society, necessarily perspective change. God.
Well, let's zoom out.
This is revealing the need for me to talk about these things more, because it's like the concepts, like when you're describing these things, the concepts are coming to mind, and I'm excited to provide a response, but I don't know what words to ascribe to these concepts, and I'm finding it really difficult to articulate. So if there's one thing I'm taking away from this, is I need to talk and write about this more, because it's hard. It's really hard to talk about.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, and probably for Fedor, not so much, right? Because actually we talk about this quite a lot, and not exactly always so directly, but in a lot of things. That's kind of like our whole business model, essentially. But yeah, so what I wanted to say is I want to zoom it out a little bit, right? Because a lot of what we're kind of discussing is very nationalized to the U.S. and the U.S.'s racial problems. Whereas there's racial problems in a lot of countries all over the world, and each context is slightly different. However, the fundamental issue of the problem we see constantly, and I guess maybe that's my experience as a journalist and reading through probably hundreds of thousands of articles about these kind of things, is that it's mostly about education and exposure. It's like, how were people taught? What did they grow up into in their formative years? What were they told by their parents or from movies, from media, stereotypes, things around them? All of these like small factors play into this reason why people divide themselves based on these things, and then they get stuck. I think another big problem is that they get hard stuck in these cultures. They don't see it, or they've never been educated on the level where they understand that culture is something that you acquire, and that over time you can absorb a new culture. You can take things that work for you or fit with your identity, and you can and then you have to also recognize things that won't apply to you because of your identity. And every person has to do that exploration. But the fact is that they need to be educated. They need to understand that first, and they need to be exposed to people who wouldn't give them only one perspective. So essentially, they need to not be in an area where there's only struggling, poor people of a certain race, so that they get this image that all people of this race have this poor struggle, and that's why they do these things. So that's why I was saying that this kind of combination, this marriage between races, or these building and fostering these relationships between not even just races but just different nations, would eventually lead to this kind of easing of racial tensions, easing of these cultural intolerances.